In this video, we're going to talk about when the other parent will not bring the children or does not bring the children to extracurricular activities. Now, I know this can be really, really frustrating for many, many parents. And I don't find there's a lot of consistency in the court really about how they handle this. I find it varies a lot given the situation. And it's really hard to kind of pinpoint, but I'm going to try to give you some guidance on what to expect and maybe what are some things that you can do. Okay. So before we dive in, let me just remind you, if you like this content and you find it helpful, don't forget to hit like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. What do we do when the other parent will not bring the child to extracurriculars? Part of this depends on the child's age. So I can tell you that if you have a parent that's not bringing your 4-year-old to T-ball, probably you can't do much about that. If you have a 15-year-old that plays basketball and has played club ball their whole life and, all that kind of thing, and the other parent isn't bringing them, you're probably going to be able to get a little more traction on that. You also probably are going to have a kid that's verbalizing, hey, I want to, be taken to the practices or the events or whatever. And so that does start to help you as they get older. But a lot of times this is happening in like 7, 8, 9, 10 range where it's kind of like the child's not quite old enough to advocate for themselves in that way yet. But also they're not so little that it's completely irrelevant because they've got, team members and other people kind of depending on them for certain things, okay, or for participation as a team member. So it is important, that they show up for them. And I have seen the court over the long haul reduce a parent's parenting time because they didn't bring children around that age to extracurriculars. But I will tell you that that's kind of unusual. Like as a general rule, as parents, we have constitutional rights. So we have the right to make decisions about how we parent during our parenting time. And so as long as you're not in violation of a specific court order, you can kind of do what you want. And most people's initial orders, at least, usually don't have anything in there that says you will bring the child to all extracurricular activities. I think this is one of those things that kind of pops up down the road that we don't really think about at the time. And we don't really know maybe at the time that the other parent is going to be non-compliant around this issue. And then as time goes on and the kid gets older or whatever happens, then we start to go, this is a problem. Okay. So the first thing that you want to do on extracurriculars is just make sure that you're following your orders. Okay. It's so amazing to me how many times somebody will ask me a question and then I say, well, what do your orders say? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm always like, okay, that's our first line of defense. We really need to know what our orders say. So in the first instance, it's like, okay, usually if you're going to sign the kid up for things on just your time, you don't necessarily need the other parent's permission most of the time. Okay. Now, again, you've got to check your orders because I see people agree to all kinds of weird things that go into orders that end up not being what the judge would order or not being what the norm is or whatever. So really double check your orders. Don't assume that what I'm saying is what your orders say. I'm just giving you examples of what I see a lot of. Okay. And most of the time, if the extracurriculars are only on your parenting time, most of the time you don't necessarily need the other person's permission, but usually you should notify them so that you can say, hey, Johnny's got baseball on my weekends, for the next 3 months. Just here's the schedule in case you'd like to attend any of the games, right? And of course, if you have a restraining order in place or different things like that, obviously, again, you got to follow your orders. So sometimes there can be issues around that. But again, for my intents and purposes in this conversation, I'm just holding to what is more typical that we see. If you have extracurriculars on your time, you don't necessarily need their permission. But if you're going to enroll the children in extracurriculars, that do involve the other parent's parenting time and you're expecting that other parent to bring them, then, you have to have a conversation about that and say, hey, I want to sign the child up for this. Is that okay with you? And then maybe the conversation ensues that, like, well, I can't take them on these couple of weeks. And then you could say, well, I could pick them up and take them if you're okay with them going, whatever. And you can try to work out logistics. I also do have parents that sometimes just go, you know what? The child's got swim every week for the next 6 weeks. And if you want to bring them on your time, great. And if not, okay. And you just take them on your time and know that the child's going to miss half the classes because that's just how life is right now. Right. So there's different ways of kind of coping with this depending on, again, the child's age, the activity, your level of difficulty in communicating with the other parent, what your orders say. All those different things have to be taken into consideration when we're looking at these types of, issues. But I can also tell you this, when you're dealing with a high conflict person, a lot of times, if you are really digging your heels in about an issue where you're like, look, you got to bring them. I signed them up. I've already paid for it. I've spent the money. You got to bring them. Or, you agreed to this and now you're not bringing them and you're a horrible parent. And, those types of things. If you're dealing with a high conflict or narcissistic person on the other side, it's probably going to cause them to bring them less and less because that's just how their brain operates, unfortunately. And if they can do something that they know bugs you, they're going to do it, even if the child is the sacrifice of that. And I know that's hard for us to wrap our minds around a lot of times because as parents, we go, okay, well, I don't love my ex. They're not like my favorite person in the world, but I'm not going to do something to hurt my ex at the expense of my children just to be able to hurt my ex, right? I would never do that. My children are my top priority. They always come first. And whatever the impact to my ex is, it is. I'm not really framing my choices around him. I'm framing my choices around the children. But when you are dealing with somebody on the other side who is narcissistic or high conflict, many times they will frame things around what can they do to upset you or make you angry. And if the child is the collateral damage of that, the child's the collateral damage of that. And I know that's horrible as a parent to even think, but it is how a high conflict person thinks a lot of the time because high conflict people are frequently incapable of considering themselves second. Most of the time, their preference or their, whatever thing, their dysfunction usually comes above everything else. And so, the effect on the kids or you or anybody else is normally secondary. But if part of their dysfunction is they need to get back at you, then the kids are the ones that become the secondary part. You would like to think that if it's sacrificing the kids, they wouldn't do it, but that is not necessarily true. So when we go back and we're upset about you didn't show up for practice, you didn't bring them, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you're really just telling them, hey, you succeeded in upsetting me. So now you can do it again and you're going to continue to upset me. So we've just told them where the button was. Okay. When you do that, I always find it's better with a high conflict person to just be like, hey, here's this activity. You want to bring them, fine. If you can't get them there and you want me to help transport on your days, fine. If you don't want them to come, fine. And honestly, if you take that hands-off approach, more times than not, they will get them there. They just don't get them there when they figure out that it's really important to you, which is, again, I know doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is how their brain works. Now, when your child does get a little bit older and the child can say, this is important to me and all those kinds of things, that does help somewhat. But you do want to be careful about not putting the child in the middle and saying, hey, here's your T-ball sign up or here's your little league sign up. But I don't know if dad or mom or whatever are okay with it happening on their weekend. So you're going to have to talk to them. I actually have clients that will say to a 7-year-old, hey, you're going to talk to your mom or dad about this. Don't say it in that way because that's interpreted as you putting the kids in the middle. So what I always say to the child is something along the lines of, hey, I know you really want, if they ask about it, you say, hey, I know you really want to sign up for this. Part of it is on mom or dad's parenting time. So I'm going to have to coordinate with them to make sure that it's going to work for all of us. And then you just leave it. And then if the child goes back and talks to the other parent, fine, but you didn't tell them to put them up to it. Those things create stress for the child. Oh, I got to go back and deal with my other parent because this parent, isn't sure that I can do this and I need to go. And they start having all this anxiety. They don't understand the dynamic between you and the other parent. And this puts them in the middle. So one, you're going to create anxiety in your child. And I find that's a very common thing that starts to happen around this 7, 8, 9 time frame. Or you're going to cause the court to say, hey, you're putting the kid in the middle because you're talking to them about things that you should be coordinating with the other parent. Then you can go to the other parent and say, hey, Little League signups came in. Kid mentioned that they really want to play. Part of this on my time, part of this on your time. I just want to double check that, are you okay with me enrolling the child before I do it? The deadline is blah, 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 whatever. So you taking that initiative to try to coordinate with the other parent, also informing the child that like, hey, I got to check with the other parent because this happens on both our time, but not putting the child up to going and checking with the other parent, if that makes sense. That's some of the strategies that can help. It's obviously not an exhaustive list, but it can help in dealing with these types of situations. Trying to go into court, it's kind of like trying to kill a gnat with a sledgehammer, right? An extracurricular is kind of a very small issue most of the time. And going into court is a very large sledgehammer for that issue. But if you'd like more help with these types of issues in your case, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's information on that page on my group coaching programs for moms and for dads. And there's also information on my premium VIP one-on-one coaching services. I usually say, if you have a little bit more complex case, you're dealing with a high conflict person, you need a lot of hands-on help, you're right at the beginning, you're kind of in the thick of it, or let's say you have an attorney for the children, you have a custody evaluator, any of those types of situations going on, then the VIP is probably going to be your ticket. But head on over to that page, check out those options, and I will see you all next time.